You have worked at giants like Google, Spotify, Microsoft, and Skype. What's one thing people often get wrong about building products in these companies?
They think that being a PM at Google or being a PM at Spotify, things are going super well, but the reality is that
You often talk about product delight. Why does it matter more than ever today?
the reality behind delight is that concept of creating emotional connection between tech products and users. Delight is a combination of two primary emotions, which are joy plus surprise.
I know you also coached a lot of teams. What's one piece of advice you find yourself giving over and over?
The best advice I give nowadays is that
Welcome to another podcast episode of Product Founder. Today, I'm super excited to talk to Nisreen. Nisreen, welcome to the podcast. Could you briefly introduce yourself?
Hi Amir, thanks for having me. So yes, I'm Nisreen. I am a product coach, trainer, and recently author. I actually spent most of my career doing product management as a PM or a product leader, but my early days were not supposed to be in the product management side. So I did engineer degree and then I got myself even deeper in tech. I did a PhD in signal processing and telecommunication and video compression. And I even started working as a research engineer for a couple of years at Bell Labs here in Paris. And then I wanted to explore the real world, because when you're doing research, actually, you're doing the imaginary world. You come up with prototypes, innovation things, and then you hand it over to other departments. And that's how I moved to become a PM. So I first became a PM for Skype, working for the Skype video team, and then worked for Spotify in Sweden. Then COVID came and I worked for Google Meet, which was an interesting time. We can talk about that later. But it's an interesting time for Meet as a product, but also being a PM at that time was an interesting episode of my life. And then I moved back to Paris, where I worked as a product lead for Chrome iOS. And it's only last year that I decided to leave Google to fully dedicate myself to helping product leaders and company build better products.
That's awesome. Love the journey. It's very interesting that every single PM that I have ever met, they all have such a different journey becoming a PM, and I can see it also the same for you, doing PhD and then being a researcher and then ended up being a PM. But since you have this amazing background, you have worked at giants like Google, Spotify, Microsoft, and you also said it's Skype. What's one thing people often get wrong about building products at scale in these companies? Let's pause here for a second. The other day, I was looking into our channel analytics and I noticed many of you guys are watching a lot of our episodes but not yet subscribed to our YouTube page or Spotify. I will ask you as a favor, please support us by subscribing to our YouTube page and Spotify page, and I will promise you I will do everything in my power to make each episode better and better. Thank you.
Okay, so in my case, I only experienced at these kind of companies, so I've seen it as obvious. But then now that I'm leaving this world and coaching smaller companies and less mature, let's say, product organizations, I'm realizing that what I've been experiencing for 15 years is not necessarily the case for everyone. So what people sometimes get wrong is, and I've been asked a lot this question, is that they think that being a PM at Google or being a PM at Spotify is like processes are extremely organized and things are going super well. But the reality is that when you work on product at scale or large organization, actually there is a chaos there. And I mean, it's not necessarily the bright image that you can see from the outside. Of course, as PM, we are doing a lot of trial. We fail as well a lot. But the best advice I usually try to give nowadays is that it's not about avoiding chaos and trying to put so much processes. It's about managing the chaos and try to live with it so that you can land the product in a safe place. So maybe just to answer your question, the best way to think about it is like even large organizations are having chaotic processes as well when it comes to building products.
That's very interesting. But do you think why we think that they're so perfect?
Of course, we see them perfect because these are successful products. I mean, for example, if I talk about Spotify, let's talk about Spotify. Spotify is an extremely adored, loved, and globally used product. Also, not only from a product perspective, but also from a culture perspective. I mean, we hear a lot about Spotify from a culture perspective, like ways of working, etc. And we think that if the product is so successful, it means that we should have like a brilliant processes in place and we're following steps, etc. But actually the reality of things, because I've been at Spotify for about 5 years, what I've seen from as an insider is that actually the culture, yes, there is a brilliant culture, like particularly the product culture, but the best part of the culture is the acceptance of failure. And we did a lot of trials that just didn't end up being in the product. But let me tell you a real story. The best features at Spotify that you're probably using today, like Discover Weekly or Daylist or AI DJs, all these features are coming from Hack Days or Hack Week. So what is Hack Week at Spotify? Like at Spotify, we're having Hack Days every month. So every month you're having 2 days two Hack Days. And toward the end of the year, you're having a full week called Hack Week. And this week is the ceremony or like the opportunity where people can join cohort and create something and show it to the C-level or the leadership team. And so as I said earlier, like big features that represent the success of Spotify are coming from this initiative that are completely bottom up and they're not necessarily structured, but they are structured by one thing, which is the culture of accepting innovation and accepting failure.
That's very interesting. Do you have other examples of why Spotify culture is special from someone that worked there?
Yes. So for someone have been there for many years, I think it's not only for Spotify, by the way, what I'm going to tell you now. And it's, let me even give you the higher picture. I'm also a public speaker. I speak a lot in conferences and I usually come up with my own topic. I spoke about like product discovery or delivery or even culture. And one day I've been invited to give a talk as a keynote, and the conference organizer asked me like, hey Nisreen, do you want to come and talk on stage, but we want you to talk about one specific topic? And I was like, hey, what do you want to talk me about? And he said, what if you tell us what's in common between the company you've been working on, like as a PM, as someone who's been inside, have you seen anything in common between those companies like Microsoft, Google, Spotify? It was not an easy question to answer immediately, but I sat down and I found out that yes, there is one thing in common. So when I thought about it, I realized that what's in common between being a PM or building products at Google, Spotify, or Microsoft is that they heavily invest in creating products that are not only functional. So think about it. Of course, functionality is extremely important, but they go beyond by also creating what I call emotional connection between the product and the user. So, of course, I'm trying to be very vocal about the topic nowadays, but this is actually a concrete observation. Like if you think about Spotify, for example, it's not only an app to listen to music, it's also an app to make you feel less lonely or to make you feel productive at some point or to make you feel connected. And as a PM or as a product lead, we actually take these needs into consideration while building features and while improving the product. So this is maybe one thing that make products stand out and make them different from others is by combining functionality with emotion.
Yeah, I love this example. We will get to that in more deeper a little bit later. But I do remember that earlier when we spoke, I asked you if you have some other interesting stories. One was you talked about the emoji reactions on Google Meet, fun but powerful feature born during a tough time. So how did that idea come about?
Interesting. So as I told you earlier, I actually joined Google Meet right when pandemic hit Europe. So it was the exact start of that tough period. And as a PM, of course, joining at that time was not, of course, an ideal time, but it was a quite interesting experience to share and to talk about. And I'm very happy to share today because, of course, like from a functionality perspective, it was not simple because we had to address the scale. Like everything moved from having meetings in offices and clinics and classroom into 100% remote. So we had to address that scale. But also as a product manager who just joined the team, do you believe me if I tell you like I spent weeks and even like more than a month trying to understand the emotional impact that this new behavior is having on our users? So of course I had to interview users and talk to them and try to understand what's the emotional and psychological impact they are experiencing by having this move, like from office to remote. And of course, I loved these moments because there've been a lot of insights, a lot of vulnerability also shared. People are saying, hey, I feel less present. I feel less engaged. I feel less connected. I feel like I'm not part of the event anymore. And of course, we took notes of that. Like people said they feel more bored than before. And we tried to collect these, like, let's say, demotivators or like a negative emotional level that were shared by users and try to convert them into features. So how might we, let's say, improve meeting experience so that we can reduce the sense of boredom and increase connectivity and interaction? And that's, by the way, how Meet Reaction was born. It was born by identifying what are the emotional demotivators that were surfaced by users, prioritize them, and see with the engineers what could be potential solutions that could address those. Emoji reaction was an amazing feature, by the way, because we, of course, when we introduced emoji reaction, it was an alternative for comment. You know, it takes effort to comment and say, I agree. Also, it's a bit invasive to unmute yourself to say, thank you, or I doesn't agree, or whatever. So emoji reaction was a way to make people feel a little bit more interactive in the call. And of course, people adopted the feature a lot, but not only adoption. The funny part of the story is that people reached out saying, hey, I want to have more emojis so I can represent more emotions and represent myself in a better way.
And did you also, I don't remember how many emojis were there from day one. Now I believe there are like 6 to 7. Did that number increase, or it was always this many?
I don't know. I left Google once we shipped the feature, so I just had to validate that the feature was great and people are adopting it right. But I remember also people wanted to have some custom emojis. You know, for example, if you're working for a company, you want to have your own emojis as well. So I remember that was something that was requested by users. But also the interesting part is that, for example, at Google, we had our own emojis, of course, that are not necessarily public, that people are not using the same emojis. And one of the emoji was a crab. I don't know why, but there been a crab, and it's funny because the crab was the one used the most. Like if you put statistics, people are using crab because they want to feel like sometimes it's not only about being serious, it's about showing your personality or being fun as well in the meeting. So, but we've been very careful about, for example, representing inclusiveness and representing all people, all skin tones. So it was not just about emojis, it's also about representing what people want to express.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I definitely use that feature a lot myself. It's very cool. I like it when someone presents something and it's amazing, and then there's that emoji with the I forgot the name, but like to celebrate
yes,
this new
the
feature
confetti.
or this.
Yes.
Yeah, confetti. Yeah, exactly. The confetti emoji. That's my favorite one that I use all the time.
Yeah, and also like sometimes it's a matter of cultural aspect. I remember when we've been building that feature, how do people celebrate from a country to another is not necessarily represented by the same emoji. Even the thumb up can have a different meaning from a culture to another. So you can imagine if you're building a product for global use, and there is a visual representation, like emoji is a visual element, how can you be extremely mindful about not hurting any culture or being inclusive for everyone as well?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's also part of like difficulties when you build a product globally. You could also build a product for a country which has like a massive population, but still you're building basically for one single nation. But when your product is used globally, there's a lot of difficulties from like language, localization, and also if those material or the content is appropriate in that region or not.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, another feature that my team worked on is like enabling gesture reaction, not emoji reaction. It means that if I do a thumb up, I want to trigger the thumb up. And that was really hard. That was even harder than emoji reaction because at some countries representing a heart could be like this and some others are it doesn't even mean something for them to do some gestures versus others. So sometimes a simple idea or even a good feature idea can be killed because it's just not possible to scale or to make it on an international level as well. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to make compromises and limit your emoji, because you asked me about the number of emojis. We had idea for more, but those more could be harmful or misinterpreted by others, so you make the compromise for not putting them and just put those that are less risky, you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully understand that. You often talk about product delight. For the listeners new to that concept, what exactly is delight in product, and why does it matter more than ever today?
Yeah, so I talk about the light, but the reality behind the light is what I expressed earlier, is that concept of building for emotional connection or creating emotional connection between tech products and end users. And by the way, the concept of emotional connection is not new for some community. Like, for example, for designers, they are well educated for emotional connection. Marketers as well. I think the best marketing campaign are those who are heavily relying on emotional advertisement. However, the reality is that product managers are not that much educated toward that topic, which for me is a sad thing, because for two reasons. The first is you create a gap. Like, designers are talking language, marketers are talking language, and then there are product managers in between having no idea what you're talking about. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that, which is about your second question, why is it so important? Actually, it's even more important nowadays because it is the opportunity or the main tool you can use to differentiate your products. Meaning that if you create an emotional connection between users and products, users become more loyal and they stay longer with the products and they use it even more. And it's a key element of differentiation in such a crowded digital market nowadays. So that's what I mean by that. And I think you agree with me that people are using a lot the word delight today, especially like in product management. We talk about, hey, we should delight our users or we should create delightful products. But the reality is that we don't necessarily know how. And that's my mission. My mission is to try to demystify the concept and make it actionable and applicable.
Yeah, I so much agree with you on that. I think many PMs miss out emotions in general. Even sometimes not necessarily building a product, but some smaller features. How can we trigger emotions? And I think the giant companies or like very small products, they spend like good amount of time like just trying to understand emotions and how they can trigger them. One of my favorite topics is like product gamifications, where emotions is used a lot in it. It's mostly for product design,
yes,
but I read a lot about it. And I try to use a lot of the functions and the thought behind it, building products that I work on.
I think gamification is an interesting tool. By the way, Duolingo is using it a lot. And for example, they have that feature called Streaks. And I've been listening to the podcast recently on Lenny's where they had the head of growth and he spoke about Streaks as a feature, double the value of Duolingo. Like, it's amazing to see like sometime just such a small feature, but also having so much impact on the app. But from my perspective, I think gamification could be used as an interesting tool, but has to be used with while being mindful as well, because there is a bit of ethical part there, so that we don't want user to be addicted, but also just want them to have fun. So what I usually mean by creating emotional connection is mostly honoring both needs, because what people sometimes forget is that you may go to a product for listening to music, for example, in the case of Spotify, but sometimes, maybe even unconsciously, you go not necessarily to listen to a specific track or whatever. You go there or you open the app because you're feeling lonely or you want to change your mood or for having some nostalgia effect that you are trying to get. And these are what we call the emotional motivators. And you need to be aware of them. You need to know them perfectly and list them so that every feature you build is not only honoring for the functional motivators, in that case like find a track or find a podcast, but also the second element, which are the emotional drivers.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I know that you're about to launch your book, Product Delight. What inspired you to take this leap from big company support to solo author?
I've strongly believe in the topic. Maybe I believe too much in the topic, so much that I first started talking about it in conferences, and I received a lot of feedback as like, hey, thanks for talking about emotion in the product mechanical world, and we need so much these kind of topics and get so much positive elements. And I actually put my researcher hat again, and I started looking at what people are talking about in that sense, in that topic. I even, by the way, found very interesting studies, some studies that have been done by Capgemini or Deloitte or McKinsey or even Harvard Business Review. And the interesting part is that while doing those research, I found very long reports, and they all studied the exact same thing. They actually studied the impact of emotional connection on product adoption. And I was like, hey, this is a sign that if giants like these are studying the exact same phenomenon within the same time frame, there's a huge interest that we're putting in the topic. And having been someone touching this from the inside and trying this like firsthand, I thought I have enough material to not only talk about the topic, but also put my experience and my thoughts into something bigger. And that's how the idea of writing Product Delight started.
Can you share a little bit more about it, how the writing of this book changed your own thinking about the product building, coaching, or even your identity as a product leader?
Yes. So first of all, when I thought about writing a book, I felt it's gonna be a side project. I mean, it's not that big and not that challenging, but as a first author, you quickly realize that writing a book is a big task. So that's probably the first thing that I experienced. But the best thing, if I have to share maybe an advice on this element for whoever want to run this from scratch, is to surround yourself with other experts. Like, for example, in my case, I've been mostly working on global companies that are mostly B2C. And I said like, hey, if you're writing about delight, you need to make sure that this is applicable for all industries. How can I make sure that this concept is applicable for everyone? So what I did, actually, I interviewed a lot of product leaders and product directors from different industries. Like, for example, I interviewed people from Dyson. I interviewed people from Atlassian. I interviewed people from GitHub. I interviewed industries that are not necessarily related to mine. And I started having these deep conversations with them about how they integrate emotional connection, their view on that, so that I collect views that are not necessarily only mine and create something coherent and applicable for everyone. So that was my strategy. So I've been a researcher for about 4 months, interviewing people, asking about their views and collecting materials. And once I'm done with that and I had my own insights material and the collected ones, I created a framework that I call the Delight model in order to help people do what I'm talking about in their own product.
Can you share a little bit more about the Delight model?
Yes. So the Delight model is just a 4-step process. It starts with identifying motivators. So it's actually the very basic and the most important step in the process is, as a PM, start by identifying users' motivators. Like, segment your users not only by behavior and demographic segmentation, but do a motivational segmentation, because the reality is that people are not using even if it's the same product, but users are not using the product for the same reason. So identifying the reasons, not only the functional reasons, but also the emotional reasons. That's step number 1. Number 2 is to convert those motivators into real product opportunities. So remember the story of Google Meet? Like, we started by identifying what demotivates users, the lack of interaction, the less of connectivity, etc., and converting those into product opportunity. Step number 3 is to identify solutions or delightful solutions that could honor those opportunities. And I created a tool that I call the Delight Grid, which is a simple grid where you represent the motivators on the grid and try to see if your solutions are solving for any of those motivators or not at all. And the last step, which is to validate delight, because the reality is that delight is touching emotion. And when we talk about emotion, there are risks of misinterpreting or misdoing or whatever. So the last step of the process is to validate the delight by making sure that you're inclusive, you're doing it in a continuous way so that you do not hit into the habituation effect, etc., etc. So it's a 4-step process that people can follow.
You use the term habitation process?
Habituation. So habituation, let me tell you maybe the theory behind delight. What people don't know is that delight is an emotion, and it's actually a combination of two primary emotion. So emotion could be categorized as primary emotion or secondary emotion. And delight is a secondary emotion that is a combination of two primary emotion, which are joy plus surprise. Just think about it for a moment. If you are experiencing joy and surprise at the same moment, you are delighted. So now, if there is an element of surprise can vanish, right? Like, I mean, you're surprised once, but the second time you're less surprised, the third time you're probably less surprised, etc. This has a name. It's called the habituation effect. It means that you get exposed to something nice and surprising many times until it's not surprising anymore. And it's actually the same for delight. People, when they saw wrapped for the first time, it's like, wow, what's that? I want to have my wrap too. I want to share it with my community, etc. But if you do not maintain this wow and this delight over time, I mean, it becomes less exciting. So one of the pillar of creating delightful product is to do it in a continuous way and to do it like over time, so you can feed that excitement and that surprise as well.
Very, very, very interesting now that I think about it. One thing I want to ask you, I don't think there are actually that many product leaders who wrote books. I think when we talked about this in one of the other podcasts with another guest as well, like you could basically, you as a PM, you don't have much options. You can write articles, create LinkedIn posts, start your podcast, have your newsletter, have your framework. But I believe like one of the hardest one, which will require a very much deep knowledge, is writing book. But I want to also understand a little bit more about the logistics of it. So finding the publisher or like having a deal. That's something that no one has talked about. So I would like the other listeners to a little bit also understand what goes behind. So it's just not like I came up with this amazing framework and I wrote about it, but how this book came by.
Yes, you're getting to the painful questions now. No, happy to, of course. I love share the experience so far. Of course, I'm about to publish it, so the hardest part is behind, and I'm hoping that the fun part is coming. But as you said, like writing, I started by writing a lot. Like it's really important to first start putting your thoughts either for yourself or publicly in blog posts, etc., so that you first get validation and also think, am I writing the right thing or not? And then when it comes to the framework, for example, what I did is that when I started having the framework, I had to apply it on different industry. Like, for example, when I sat with a leader from Atlassian, we said, hey, what if we apply it in your case and let's see if it works or not? I did it the same for GitHub, etc., so that we make sure that it's applicable and not coming with something that is just for Google or for Spotify, etc. But then once I had that validation, let's say, and I think that the material is correct and we can go ahead with something bigger like the book. To be honest with you, what helped me is that when I did my PhD, I mean, I had to write like a 300-page manuscript anyway, so the experience of writing was not terrifying for me. So that was like an enjoying part. However, writing a PhD manuscript and writing a book are extremely different because the manuscript is for the academic side. However, the book is going to be public. So I had to treat it like a product, meaning that I want to make sure that it's not for me. It's not just a self-achievement that I want to achieve. It's not just making sure that the book is out. So I actually surrounded myself with a big, let's say not necessarily, but at least a reasonable number of people that are ready to read and beta read and support and give feedback. So I created a group of 30 people that are within the domain, that are extremely generous with their feedback, and every chapter was written. They are there to share their feedback and their thoughts. So that was a big helper. Also not to give up, because one of the risks when you're writing is being so solo. If you're not getting this regular feedback, you can say like, what the hell am I talking about, or is this valid? So that's the biggest value that I got. Then once let's say the content was completely written or close to be done, I actually decided to go self-publishing. I'm not going with a publisher. That it was a decision, or at least a choice that I made, because I just wanted to be my book and not be influenced by the feedback of the editor. Like I know I've been approached by an editor and they put a lot of their view into the cover, into the content, into the words that they're using. So they have a lot of their words in how you write your book. So I wanted to have the freedom of putting all the stories I have. And also, to be honest, I'm actually calling it Product Delight, but it has another title, which is Personal Product Stories, because it's a lot of product stories in there. And it doesn't make sense that I change them based on editor feedback or something like that. But now that we're getting closer to the publishing, I realized that writing is the easiest part. I mean, you may be surprised, but because when we see an author publishing a book, we see that person as a writer. The reality is that the writing is the smallest piece of publishing a book. When you're writing a book or publishing a book, you are a writer, you are a marketer, you are an editor, you are a designer, you're doing everything. And the writing is the smallest, believe me, because when I started getting feedback from the beta readers and you have to edit that, and I have some figures as well, I had to be a designer. And now I need to come up with a strategy of launch and marketing, because nobody is going to give me that strategy. I need to come up with that. So that's the story so far. But what helps me a lot is being surrounded by authors who successfully published their book, and they are so generous. Honestly, like I'm so grateful for their feedbacks and their advice. They're very open with what worked for them, what did not work for them. So a big thank for everyone who helped so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just a question there. You said that you decided to publish it yourself and not having a publisher. When you have a publisher, do they also help you with the promotion, or that's not something they do?
I think it depends on the publisher. Some publisher will tell you you're not even allowed to do any marketing yourself. They take the marketing part completely. Some others would say, we do not do marketing, so do the marketing yourself. I think it depends a lot on which publisher you pick. But honestly, I heard a lot. I mean, I really reflected a lot on this topic because I really want to make sure that I'm not doing a mistake here and I'm writing it only once. So am I doing the right thing or not? And I know a lot of people told me that if you go with a publisher, you get more into credibility. Like if your book is published with Person or O'Reilly or whatever, you're getting that credibility. And honestly, I thought about it from a different angle. I said, like, I do have the credibility. I mean, why do I need to rely on O'Reilly or Person to get the credibility? I've been working on big giants and big companies. I validated my model with a lot of industries, and I do believe in the content and the quality of the content of my book. So do I really need to share royalties and get into those constrained elements from an editor? But then you have to accept the risk that you're gonna do a lot on your site. A lot. Like you have to hire a development editor, you have to hire a permission editor, you have to do everything that an editor is supposed to help you with. But I had to do that myself with some independent companies.
I think based on the feedback, based on the insight you share, I have a feeling that you made a very right choice.
I hope
but it's
so.
Gonna be, I think it's gonna be, there's going to be some more difficulties there and some things that you have to figure out yourself along the way. But I have a feeling that the end results is gonna be better over time.
As I told you earlier, like I spoke with people, like authors who went with editors and others who went without editors, and I was like doing my list of pros and cons. It was really like, I think I still have that list somewhere. It's like a long list of pros and cons, and then I said, what do I value among these pros and what do you value among these cons? Like what are the things that you're okay with giving up on, and what are the things that you're not okay at all? And when I did my prioritization tool, like as every PM, I ended up finding that in my case, and I think in my case, that's what worked best for me. Also, Amir, what I want to highlight is like, I don't want people to get me wrong as well. Like I'm dedicating myself to this. Like I left Google to do this project. However, If I've been working full time and trying to write the book on myself, probably I would not have that capacity and that energy to handle and discover all these elements of the journey myself. So maybe that's the thing. The fact that I dedicated myself to make it the way how I wanted helped me going through the self-publishing process.
I truly believe and understand what you're saying when it comes to building and having your own craft. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know you also coached a lot of teams now. So what's one piece of advice you find yourself giving over and over, no matter the company or the product stage?
Oh my God, that's another painful question. Honestly, because when I left Google again, as I told you earlier, like I left a very mature organization, so mature that you're not in an environment that you question, should I have a strategy or should I interview users? I mean, of course. I mean, that's the core of building product. But now that I'm coaching smaller organizations, there are two things actually, not one thing. The first is that whenever I ask people, did you validate that with your users? Believe me, I still get the questions like, no, I don't think so. We are convinced that's the right problem. Really. I mean, that really like hit me strong and hard, because how can you be convinced that that's the right problem without having spoken once to the users? So I see organizations spending months brilliantly engineering products and features that are not at all validated, not even once with their users. That's number one. And the second is that they are taking not seriously the concept of having a strategy. When I ask about what's your strategy, I'm getting a list of features, I'm getting a roadmap, which for me is completely wrong. We're not talking about strategy here. Like for me, strategy, it means that there are two valid options, two strong valid options, and you decided to go with one option and not the other. It's not because the other is bad, it's probably equally good, but you decided with this because you are in a position that that's what you want to validate or you focus on this time. So, for example, I've seen some strategy that some people would say, our strategy is to provide the best user experience. Really? Because the other one is to provide a bad experience? Do you think that's a strategy? That's the alternative you could have chosen between? No. So those are the two things, like not talking to users, that drives me nuts. And the second is not having a strategy, but rather a list of features.
Thank you for sharing that. We're slowly getting close to the end of the podcast episode. Is there something you would like to share with the listeners? Anything you recently maybe published, or when the book is going to be out?
Yeah, so the book is coming out this September. I'm excited. It's going to be an enjoyable moment, at least for me, and I hope people will enjoy it as well. The book is going to be available on Amazon. But before that time, I do have a Substack newsletter. I'm calling it Delight Tips. I share weekly stories, like delightful stories, some sneak peek of the book as well for those who want to join. So it's available, and also they can be aware of what's going on with the book and how things are progressing. Otherwise, they can reach out as well. I'm very available on LinkedIn, happy to help, and I'm hoping that I can spread and help create more delightful and more emotionally engaging products, because we really need that nowadays.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for joining this podcast episode. It was amazing talking to you.
Thank you, Amir. My pleasure.
Wow, you made it till the end. I'm very proud of you. Comment down below which part of the podcast did you like the most, and who should I interview next. Also, on the screen, you will see a lot of our other great episodes that you should definitely check out.